even though you might have had rough circumstances when you were coming up, that doesn't have to predict where you are going to be in the future. All you have to do is make a decision that you want to do something different and move differently with intention and with purpose. Kings and queens, welcome. I am Nakia, Nikki Dade, for those that know me and for those that are going to get to know me. I am an investor. I'm a licensed realtor in both Maryland and DC, a serial entrepreneur, a true definition of a Renaissance woman. And I am deeply passionate about financial literacy and building wealth intentionally. But before we get started, do me a favor. Could you like this video so others are able to find this content? They can learn and grow with us, and subscribe to the channel if you want to come along with me on this journey, and then run on over to join my free Facebook group, because we will be sharing all types of things on free games, on building your credit, different credit scoring models, your credit scores, both personal and business, investment vehicles, and my favorite, the money game. Growing up, money was never really a conversation in our house. I mean, my mom was a teenage mother, raising 3 kids. And at one point, she was raising us by herself. And I was a latchkey kid, and I was raising the kids. So the focus wasn't really on financial systems or wealth strategy. The focus was on survival. Because of that, many of the things that we talk about today, when it comes to money, credit, banking, and investing, those were simply conversations that were not happening in our household when I was growing up. Not because my mother didn't care. It was because she was raising her children and trying to make sure everyone was taken care of. That was the priority. The priority was providing and surviving. So like many people, I entered into adulthood without a real understanding of how the financial system actually works. I didn't understand how credit systems work, how banks use leverage, how investors use debt strategically, how ownership really creates wealth. At a certain point in my life, I realized something important. If I wanted to change my financial future, I had to learn the system myself. So I started studying. I studied credit. I studied scoring models. I studied the credit scoring systems. I studied the banking system, leverage and debt, real estate investing, wealth building strategies. And once I understood how the system actually worked, that's when I was able to start rebuilding my financial life intentionally. One of the things that I felt was very important to me was ensuring the lessons that I learned, that I also passed it forward to my siblings. So I opened bank accounts for my brother, for my sister, so that I could teach them the same things that I was learning. I did it for my mom, but I didn't stop there. And I decided, because our family was hit with so many different tragedies when we were coming up, I wanted to change the trajectory for my son. I decided I wanted to teach him about financial systems. My paternal grandmother is actually who I know now, my granny now, that was extremely impactful in my life and in my education as well. And she was an integral part, I would say, of education and impressing that upon us as well. With that, when I was growing up, there was a lot of drugs that was coming through our neighborhood as well too, that I knew I didn't want my son to be a part of, and I knew that I wanted him to have a different outcome. I knew that. And so this is why it was important to me, because I watched my aunt actually bury my cousin. I actually helped her plan the funeral. We didn't know how we were going to pay for it as well. This is when I figured out that I knew I needed to have insurance policies on my child. Because of that, I didn't want to be in a situation where something happened to my child and I couldn't bury my son. So I understood insurance policies were important. I understood financial planning was important, because there are tragedies or circumstances that happen in people's lives that we just can't control. And so financial preparation and planning for things like that is important. We didn't have reserves to pull from when life happened. We didn't have those reserves. We didn't have an account to go to write a check for whatever it was. And so I knew that was something that was important to me. I was inducted into the National Honor Society. I was on honor roll my entire life. I had A's and B's, dean's list, principal's list, all of the things you can name. But when it was time for me to go to college, I didn't have $1. Not $1. And so I had to figure out how I was going to fund this. When I went to school, I had to take out a number of different loans. Back during that time, there was predatory lending, so I had credit cards that I maxed out. I was in a bunch of debt in over my head, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to pay for school. My mentor, Betsy, whom I love and still keep in contact with, she actually was the one that actually signed for me to go to school. And so I am so eternally grateful for her for doing that. But even with that, while I was in school, I had racked up, I don't even know, $40,000 or more in debt, and I wasn't even working. I had no idea how I was going to pay that debt back. I had to make a choice. I either had to sink or swim. So that's when I really started learning, and I found out that you could actually negotiate with the creditors. But you had to have money and cash on the dollar to do it. And so instead of going to what it was credit financial system that you could sign up with, but at the time it was going to be a derogatory mark on my credit, so I didn't want to pursue that. I decided I wanted to do it on my own. To do it on my own, you had to understand the system. I negotiated all of my payments. I negotiated what I could pay and how I could pay it. I had to figure out how they reported, what bureaus they reported to, and then I negotiated with the creditors on how I was going to pay them back. And I was able to pull myself out of that, but I had to learn the system on my own to do that. Learning the system requires a lot of work. I'm gonna be honest with you. It requires a lot of due diligence. It requires reading and research and not being afraid to be transparent and have conversations. Let them know you know where you are. Let them know you know that you need help. Actually, they will help you if you tell them what's happening. And so through this process, I learned a lot about the money game and how it worked, credit systems, the credit scores, how you impact your scores, how you push your scores, understanding when the due date happens and the difference between the due date and actually the closing of your cycle, which matters because your due date, you make a payment, but then the closing cycle is actually when it's reported to the credit bureau. It's important to know those things because you can still impact your score before that cycle closes. So I'm saying all that to say, if you're disciplined and you're focused and you're committed to the journey, you can do it. If you find yourself in a hole, don't give up. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to do what you're doing here. Join this channel, learn the game, and then go back and take control of your life. When I did realize that these things were important, I started trying to backtrack. And I was like, gosh, if I didn't blow that money, I would probably be a millionaire by now. But that doesn't mean if you make a mistake or what your past is will predict what your future is. And so I want to encourage you and let you know that it's never too late. It's never too late to start. When you realize that you can make different choices, all you have to do is decide. When I made the decision that I wanted to make different choices with my money, I started to see more of my money. I started to plan for my future. Not only did I clean up my credit and learn the credit system, I started learning the credit game with credit cards and how now to leverage other people's money to increase my wealth and to get more assets. Even though you might have had rough circumstances when you were coming up, that doesn't have to predict where you are going to be in the future. All you have to do is make a decision that you want to do something different and move differently with intention and with purpose. If you're someone who wants to learn more about financial literacy, real estate, investing, and building wealth intentionally, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because this is where we're going to continue having real conversations about wealth, ownership, and opportunity. And remember, ownership changes everything.